I'd be willing to bet that I've made every possible backpacking and camping mistake. So I'm gonna tell you about 3 in particular that left me hungry, sleepless, and cold. First up is probably the worst mistake that I've ever done, and it almost ruined a long distance backpacking trip. This was in 2009, and I brought a stove called the Bush Buddy to Colorado to do a section hike of the Colorado Trail. And at that time, this stove was almost viral in popularity. I think it was Ryan Jordan from Backpacking Light that kind of brought it out to the world, and I got one and I played with it for a year or something, and I felt pretty comfortable, and I decided to bring that stove for a few reasons. The main one being is that I didn't want to have to deal with picking up fuel and kind of the logistics of all of that. I figured I'd have this stove and cook my food whenever I needed to. But I was so wrong about that stove. It turned into a snowball effect of basically not being able to cook for a bunch of reasons. First of all, there was the time factor. So getting up in the morning, I had pretty big mileage days planned out, and I wanted to be able to hit the trail and get going fast. I didn't have time to make a fire and get going. The other thing, which was a huge one, is that it was really hot. And when it's hot out, you crave different kind of food, and you definitely don't want to be making a fire to cook your food. You want to be able to warm something up quickly, eat it, and you don't want to be getting more hot than you already are. So that was another thing. The other problem was that there's fire hazards in Colorado. It's very arid, so I was nervous the whole time. It wasn't illegal where I was, but I was just really stressed out. I also couldn't use it in trail towns. If I got into any kind of little town and wanted to cook something really quickly, well, I couldn't make a fire in the middle of a town, whereas you can use a canister stove. So it basically meant that I ended up skipping a bunch of meals just because I couldn't be bothered with the hassle and I didn't have the time. It just didn't work out well. Not everything is for everyone, and not everything works in every situation. The next mistake was more recent in 2021. I met up with a guy called Max who had just set the fastest known time for the Quebec section of the International Appalachian Trail. Our plan was just to do a quick overnight northeast of Ottawa, kind of hike to a lake, get some mileage in, just sort of meet each other and, go hiking and camping. On that trip, I brought a tarp. Now, you have to know that in Quebec, the bugs can be pretty bad. But I must have gone camping recently because I'm normally very careful when it comes to making sure that I'm equipped for bugs. But on that trip, I brought a tarp and I didn't bring a bug bivvy. I did have a mesh bug net, but that was it. Mesh bug net, tarp, and a quilt. So we hiked along this lake and got to the outlet, which was where we were gonna camp for the night. So it's a sandy beach, and pitching a tarp in sand is a nightmare in itself. But as we're setting up, the bugs came out in force. The air was hot, humid, stagnant, and we just got eaten alive. We made a fire, that helped a little bit, but when I went to bed, I spent the night completely awake, sweating, because I had to use my quilt to protect me from the bugs, and it was just too hot for that. And I've used the quilt plus bug net multiple times to protect myself from mosquitoes, but typically they kind of go to bed at night and it cools down. I basically stayed awake all night, questioning my life choices, and was a complete zombie the next day. The third mistake that I want to talk about was a complete ego check. So my buddy Zach and I planned a 3-day trip last fall, and it involved some pretty remote travel north of Lake Louise in Banff National Park. It was a loop, and the most challenging section was the back end. So once you commit, there's no turning back. Zach had just got off the GDT. He had hundreds of kilometers under his feet. We've done trips together, so there's absolutely no concern. In the week leading up to the trip, the forecast started to get a little bit spicy with potential rain, maybe some snow, But that wasn't unusual since we were looking at the last weekend of September. At some point, Zach sends me a message and says, "What shoes are you gonna wear?" And I said, "Just trail runners. I don't think the forecast is gonna be that bad." I could tell there was some reluctance with my answer, but we both showed up to start the trip wearing our trail runners. Now, at the valley bottom, there was a dusting of snow. It was no big deal. But as we gained elevation, the snow accumulated. Once we hit tree line and then the first pass, my feet were soaked. And when we looked over the pass, all we could see was winter. Now, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. I had brought neoprene socks and some other gear that's pretty much my shoulder season setup. So I felt fairly confident, but I don't think Zach had any of that gear. And I think it was starting to wear on his mind. We were 3 hours in with 2.5 more days of survival mode, winter shoulder season hiking, or 3 hours down the hill, drive to town and have burgers and beer.
The weather is not spectacular. You're not feeling it. I'm not, okay.
I think you know what we did. The take home from that one is sometimes you've got to bail, there's nothing wrong with it, and the shoulder season is very challenging, especially for footwear. There's a reason why most people stay home once the summer ends. I wish there was some kind of clever take-home message that could tie those 3 stories together, but ultimately, sometimes you get it wrong.